Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to have lots of tips on how to blend acrylics when working on larger areas such as backgrounds. Now my first tip here is to get some kind of colour on your canvas. It can be quite daunting to work with the white of the canvas and can make us hesitate because we don't have any paint on the canvas at all. Now this also makes it a bit easier to start blending with the larger areas of acrylic if we've already got some kind of layer in place first. Now the background for this was actually a painting I did of my own dog, and the top section is the sky. It then progresses down to a midsection of foliage in the distance, and then I'm going to have some out of focus trees for a blurry woodland effect. But to start with here, to make the blending process easier, I want to work with what's further away initially and build up the elements in stages. Now if I was to try to paint in the trees as well at this point, it would blend in with the blue and then I'd end up with more of a muddy layer to this very first stage. So to prevent that from happening, I like to blend my acrylics in more manageable sections. This also makes blending the softness between one colour to the next easier as well if we are only working on one element at a time. Now the exception to that is if in this situation I want to blur the sky into the greenery for these very distant sections of my painting. This is where using a fine mist spray bottle is invaluable. Now a fine mist spray bottle is going to put a light layer of water over the top but avoid any heavy droplets. So this is a real advantage when trying to get a softer blend because that larger droplet of water can actually lift some of that paint rather than blend. Now this can also happen if too much water is used and applied to the canvas even when using a fine mist spray bottle. So getting that balance right is really important. Now this of course is something that I do cover in the real-time version of this tutorial, every aspect of blending from the base layer to those final stages. If that real-time lesson is of interest, I'll link the information to that in the description below. Now when I work with areas of a background that need to be blended from one colour to the next, it's going to make this easier if the blue and the green are wet at the same time, and this is where the fine mist spray bottle really does come into its own. So by lightly misting here, I'm able to keep the blue wet even though I've done that quite a few minutes previously, and I can now use my makeup brush to blend the green into the blue. Now one other area that I do cover in the real-time version is how to blend a layer of paint if the layer underneath it has already dried. Now you can incorporate using the fine mist spray bottle in exactly the same way, but spray the water first. That would act like a layer of wet paint, then apply your paint and then mist that again if you need to extend that drying time before progressing back with your makeup brush. But all of that is demonstrated in the step-by-step version of this tutorial. Now as I work on the slightly darker greens at the bottom of this canvas, I'm going to again apply my paint, I'm going to mist with water and then come back in with my blending brushes. Now this combination of technique here is going to vary depending on the size of the painting as well. Working larger, that paint's going to have more time to dry, so you would need to potentially mist more with your fine mist spray bottle. Working on smaller paintings, we're going to have to work with a little bit more of a refined approach because overblending can more easily happen. In some cases with a smaller painting, 1 or 2 swipes with the makeup brush is enough to get the desired blend. But here this wouldn't be enough. This is a 16-inch canvas, so therefore more time needs to be allocated for each individual technique. Now once I've got my desired level of softness, I can then wait for this to dry, either naturally for a few minutes or speed that up with my hairdryer. Now a top tip if you are using your hairdryer for the drying process is to make sure that the canvas goes back to room temperature before you start working on your next layer. If your canvas is still warm from the heat of your hairdryer, then that is going to speed up the drying time massively and make blending acrylics far harder. Now at this stage here, you can see that I'm using more of the water more frequently so that I can then blend more of this lighter blue into the green. Now at this stage, the green paint is dry. So what I'm doing here is using the water initially to act as that layer of wet paint and then blend the blue into the green. Now what this enables is more of a controlled blending approach. We can work more on one layer at a time rather than worrying about keeping the green paint wet and the blue paint wet at the same time. So if you are struggling with blending acrylics, working with a fine mist spray bottle on top of a dry layer can actually give us a little bit of breathing space for practicing and refining these techniques. Now, one of the other things to consider here is a lot of what I'm painting at the moment is going to eventually get covered up. So I want the bulk of this softness in place, but it doesn't have to be perfect. I've got so many trees that I'm going to be putting in front and a lot of greenery in the midsection of this background that as long as I've got an overall softness here, that is absolutely fine. I just want to avoid any harsh edges. Now I just want to leave this last bit in this video because this shows here how we can simplify the blending process by working with a layer that is dry and then putting in something that is going to be soft and blended with a completely separate layer. Now if I'd have tried to blend this brown in with the blue and get a softness here, I can do that, that is achievable, but it's more likely to give me a muddier colour if the brown mixes in with the blue. And for this specific background, I did need to keep these colours more separate, but still have a softness in that transition from one colour to the next. So by using all of the techniques that I've mentioned here previously, working with a dry layer, spraying with water, adding the paint, and then blending, I'm able to keep my colours more separate, but still achieve this lovely soft, blurry effect. Now, one other thing I want to just quickly mention is it's normal that the background stage at this point in the painting process looks fairly terrible. We need to be building up the softness in stages and adding each element gradually. We can't achieve a high level of realism and achieve the blending in only one or two layers. It just isn't possible. So we need to be making sure that we're only focusing on one layer at a time, especially for a complex background like this. It does make it more manageable. So although there is a lot of this background that I still need to add, I'm going to have more videos here on YouTube over the next couple of weeks that show more snippets of this background with other blending techniques that I have incorporated. But for this little video, it doesn't obviously look finished at all, but the bulk of these techniques that I've mentioned we can use for getting the basic base foundation of a blurry background established. Once I've then built up where I've wanted my softness for this stage, I can then start to consider more of my mid-ground elements such as the trees and the foliage that is behind the trees but also behind my dog Lexi. So those techniques I'll have in a separate video very soon. Now I have got the time-lapse version with a voiceover of me painting Lexi. You can see the little snippet here where I'm working on her ear. I do have that available as a video here on YouTube, so I'll link that in the description below if it's of interest. It's packed with lots of tips on how to paint realistic fur, both blurry fur that is more softer in appearance, and then those finer details such as these lovely long hairs on the very edge of her ear. So I do hope this video has been useful. If it was, I'd be very grateful if you could give it a like and a thumbs up. It makes a huge difference to my channel. I do also upload a couple of videos to YouTube every week, so if you would like to get notified of that content, then don't forget to hit the subscribe and the bell button. If you are interested in any of my real-time step-by-step lessons, I'll link the information to those in the description below. And if you have any art-related questions, feel free to pop them in the comments. I'm always happy to help if I can. And I'm going to be uploading another video at the end of the week. But as always, thank you so much for watching.